Good evening and Happy New Year to everyone who's making the time to join us tonight for Uncle Bobbie's first virtual author event of the new year 2021. We are starting this year off with a bang. I'm so thrilled to be sharing this amazing book and author with all of you that are tuning in right now. We are celebrating The Prophets, the debut novel by Robert Jones Jr., which was released just last week. And if you haven't already, I urge you to do yourself a favor and go get yourself a copy. The green button below will take you to Uncle Bobbie's bookshop to order online, or you have the option of coming into the store sometime this week and picking up a signed copy. We're going to get into the discussion in just a few moments, but I'd like to remind you all that we will be having an audience Q&A session directly following the conversation. So throughout the discussion, please submit your questions for the author using the Ask a Question module right beneath the screen. Are we ready? Allow me to introduce our moderator for the evening. You know her from her New York Times best-selling novel, Such a Fun Age. You might have even come to see her at last year's Uncle Bobbie's event. Please welcome a fellow Philadelphian favorite, Kiley Reid.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. All right, so now I'd like everyone to help me in welcoming our featured author. He's a New York City writer with a BFA in creative writing and an MFA in fiction from Brooklyn College. He's written for many renowned publications, including the New York Times, Essence, the Paris Review, and the Brio. He's the creator of the Son of Baldwin's social justice social media community. Here we have him. His name is Robert Jones Jr. Yay. Welcome.
Hi. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'll let you get into it.
Man of the hour. Robert, it is so nice to be here with you instead of through emails. Robert and I have the same wonderful publisher and editor, and we consider ourselves siblings, even though we haven't met in person yet. And so this feels like a family reunion of sorts. But before we get to anything else, I would love for you to read from this lovely, lovely work just for a little bit and set the stage for us.
Certainly. I am going to read from the beginning of the book, or toward the beginning of the book, just after Samuel and Isaiah have a playful bit of a moment inside the barn in which they work. And here we go. Samuel sucked his teeth but returned to his position, lying next to Isaiah. Just as he got comfortable, the scratching noise returned. He didn't hear it, but Isaiah looked in the direction it was coming from, close to the horse pens. Something took shape there. It was first a tiny point, like a star, and then it spread until it was the night he was brought to the plantation. 20 of them, maybe more, piled into a wagon drawn by horses, all of them chained together at the ankles and at the wrists, which made movement labored and unified. Some of them wore iron helmets that covered their entire heads, turned their voices into echoes and their breathing into rattles. The oversized contraptions rested on their collarbones, leaving behind gashes that bled down to their navels and made them woozy. Everyone was naked. They had traveled over bumpy, dusty trails for what to Isaiah seemed a lifetime, the sun burning their flesh in a day and mosquitoes tearing it up at night. Still, they were thankful for the torrential showers when those without helmets could drink at their leisure rather than at the gunmen's. When they finally reached empty, which was what, in the quiet places, people called the Halifax plantation, and for good reason, he couldn't make out anything except a dim light coming from the big house. And then they were pulled by one from the wagon, each of them stumbling because none of them could feel their legs. For some reason, the weight of the helmet made it impossible to stand. Others had the burden of being held down by the corpse they were chained to. Isaiah, who was just a child, didn't even know enough to consider the man who lifted him up and carried him, even though his own legs were about to give. "I got you, little one," the man said. his voice labored and dry. Your mom made me promise, and I gotta tell you your name. Then everything went black.
And that's just the first chapter, everyone. It's really beautiful. It's a really, really gorgeous novel. Congratulations. And
Thank you.
let's dive in. First of all, I'm sure this is not the publication that you had anticipated. It is not the year that any of us have anticipated. And it's a strange thing because of so many things that have happened before, and that when you write a novel, your novel stays the same. And then the world changes very much. And so I'm curious for you how it is to have it out in the world, and especially when the world looks the way that it does.
Frightening in a way, because, okay, so the novel is taking place in the 19th century, early 19th century, and I'm living in 2020, 2021, and I see nothing but similarities between the world that I imagined here and the world that I'm living in now. And so the frightening part is in recognizing how resilient anti-Blackness is. And how much this nation is embedded in the idea of the destruction of Black bodies, whether through being shot down on the streets or through what they call the medical apartheid, whatever it is. This nation's currency seems to be Black blood, and I just confronting that as a Black person is frightening. But even more frightening is the fact that the rest of the nation, the non-Black aspects of the nation, refuse to confront it, so we can never move past it.
I'm sure you're on the receiving end of so many people saying this book is so relevant, this book is so timely, when your book shows that this has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, and is a reminder of that. And so it's a really difficult thing to realize how relevant your work is and how relevant it will be for some time. I would love to start from the outside and work my way in. This cover is beautiful. How did you get there? How did it happen? Tell me everything.
We actually started with a different cover that I immediately fell in love with. It was like a river that formed two faces, and it was just absolutely beautiful, designed by Vian. I never remember how to pronounce this last name.
Nugent. Yes.
Nugent.
Yes, she was mine. Yes.
Oh, she was yours too?
Yes, she did mine too. She's wonderful.
She was fabulous. Sally called me into the office. She was like, "Do you have time to come in today?" And I was actually going to Toni Morrison's memorial.
That's a big deal.
Right? And I said, okay, before I head to the memorial, I'll stop in the office. And Sally she gave me this like really great story, and then she unveiled it, and I was like, oh my God, I love it. And then I met Vian and the rest of the art team, and I was almost in tears about how much I loved it. Then when we revealed it, someone emailed me or messaged me on Instagram and said, hey, I was in a bookstore and I thought I saw your book, and I went to go pick it up and I realized it's not your book. So there was another cover that was kind of similar.
Okay.
And it broke me in half. And Sally said, don't worry about it. We'll go with plan B. And then they unveiled that cover. And okay. I was like, okay, I think I actually love this one more than I love the first one. And I don't know how that's even possible, except that Vian is a genius. Like that's the only way it is possible. In fact, I saw today, someone took pictures of either the North Carolina mountains or Virginia mountains. It looks exactly like this.
She got it.
Completely. And so here we have the most beautiful cover ever. I love this cover. And what I love about it is how the Putnam team branded everything around it.
They know what they're doing. I know.
I love the Putnam team. Let me tell you.
I know. We got it good. I'll move in. I'll do whatever I need to do. No, I'm with you. It's beautiful. I love that this is, option B. This is a really, really beautiful cover.
It's
and
then
also, if reading your novel wasn't enjoyable enough, your dedication section is a little bit different than most dedication sections, and I would love to talk about it. There's such lovely names in here and so many relatives, and I'm curious why you chose to include all of them.
You know, my husband was reading this book about publishing in the industry, and he said, you know, your acknowledgments are not supposed to be more than a page, maybe a page and a half long. And I thought, that's going to be impossible, because there are so many people I have to thank, so many people who were living for this moment for me to write thank you to them in this book. I wanted to thank every single person that I can think of that ever encouraged me, that ever supported me, that ever inspired me. And when I look at that section now, I think about all the people that I forgot, or that I couldn't make, like it was beyond the deadline, I couldn't add their name.
Right.
But that was the purpose of that. It functioned, someone told me, as its own chapter.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
Sally told me that the proofreaders were all like writing down the names, saying, oh, I want to know about this artist or this writer or this musician from reading those acknowledgments. So, but I just wanted to make sure that I thanked as many people as possible who helped me in some way along this journey, the 14-year journey of writing this book.
I love that so much. You know, and you know what? I will say, sometimes when I read it and there's like, you know, only 6 people mentioned, I'm like, there's no way. There's more people. It takes such a village to put something like this forward. And I think it's really, really beautiful. Let's get into it. Okay. Let's say the elevator doors are closing and I'm on one side and you're on the other. And I'm like, oh, wait, what is your book about? And it's closing. What do you tell me?
The Prophets is about Samuel and Isaiah. 2 enslaved young men are on a plantation in Mississippi during antebellum slavery who are in love, and how that love transforms everyone around them, whether enslaver or enslaved.
That was really good. That was good. You are on book tour, even if it is virtual. Yes. So there's so many things I want to talk about with Samuel and Isaiah. And the first one is time. When I was in graduate school, I took a lecture on time in the novel with Ayanna Mathis, and it really made me think differently about time. And with Isaiah and Samuel, there's so much more to think about other than how time functions on a daily basis. Every movement they have is guided by the clock. They never have a morning to themselves. Their movements, the way that they are with each other, the way that they show love to each other is all about time. I'm curious how their relationship and their enslavement and how that time has been stolen from them altogether, how that affected your pacing throughout the novel.
One of the things that I was really conscious of when writing this novel, if not directly focusing on the pacing itself, but at least how time is perceived by the characters in this book, was that enslaved Black people generally did not know how old they were. Mm. So because there were no birth certificates, they were listed with property. And then they had no parents to tell them, this is when you were born. They had no concept of this is January, this is February, this is the year 18, whatever. Mm-hmm. So time functioned in a very different way for them, other than keeping time by rhythm of the picking of the cotton, or keeping time by them knowing what time of day work ends or work begins. So that was how I was kind of thinking about time when I was writing this novel, that it would not be precise, but it would be judged by rhythm. It would be judged by routine, and that it would be judged by an inner sense of timelessness, if that's such a thing. And so those things in tandem sort of informed how I was thinking about pacing.
I love that a lot. It's funny how there is a really beautiful timelessness to this novel, and yet it's tragic in that time was stolen. And that's why it's not there anymore. It's really, really beautiful. One thing I love working with students on especially is inserting research into their fiction. I'd love to know about your research for this novel. Especially, there's a lot of biblical passages here too, and I'm curious about joining biblical texts to fiction.
Well, in terms of the research, I was an Africana Studies minor in undergrad. So I had the great benefit of having access to all of these wonderful works, whether slave narratives or works on race theory, sociological works, anthropological works, historical works. So I had sort of like all of this research under my belt just as a matter of study.
Mm-hmm.
But then reading through these books, something struck me as odd, which was prior to the Harlem Renaissance, there are no Black queer mentions anywhere of anybody. So I thought, well, where are the Black queer characters before the Harlem Renaissance? We didn't just pop up and say, hey girl, here we are in 1929. So I started going about the way of, all right, where can I find them? And so I started rereading everything. And I came across, which I missed the first time actually, a line in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs.
Okay.
She talks about, in just one sentence, how a white slave master raped one of his male enslaved people. And then when in my third reading of Toni Morrison's Beloved, I realized that there's a whole section where Paul D is sexually assaulted by a male overseer. And I thought, okay, but what about love? And I could find no references whatsoever to love between two same-sex or two same-gender Black people during a time prior to the Harlem Renaissance. And returning to Morrison, who said, if you cannot find the book you wish to read, you must write it. I started to write it. First year of graduate school.
First year. So then how long in total was this book in creation?
From 2006, which was my first year in grad school, to the last time Sally and I touched it, which was early 2020, first quarter 2020, 14 years.
I mean, it reads like it's a nice wine that you put away for 14 years. That's wonderful. And I have so much to say about that, and that, you know, we all have family members we love, but some who say, oh, you know, it wasn't like that when I was growing up, or that wasn't around when I was growing up. And I think that, one, it wasn't around for you because it wasn't in front of your face, but two, art matters. And the art that you see and the love that you see matters. And I'd love to know about your reception from, you know, people who think that it wasn't happening when it's been happening since the dawn of time.
In fact, if you'll notice that in the book, there are chapters that actually go back to pre-colonial Africa. And that is actually me in conversation with that exact perspective, that queerness is something, many people in many Black communities believe that prior to European colonization, every Black person on the entire continent of Africa was cisgender and heterosexual. And it wasn't until we were introduced to perversions by Europe did Black people become queer or transgender or what have you. Patently false. My own research showed this. In fact, in the oral histories, I was listening to Esther Arma, who is an artist activist, brilliant woman, who's from Ghana. And she said, if you said to my grandparents, what's a homosexual? They say, I have no idea. But then if you explain to them what homosexuality means, they go, oh, love. Because in her tribes, homosexuality didn't need to be distinguished from any other sort of love. It was just natural, normal part of human existence. Mm-hmm. And as she put it, love and sex were like land. There were no boundaries. And so I wanted to make sure that I included that to kind of push back against the narrative that queerness is a result of some sort of trauma or some sort of perversion, mm-hmm. and reinstate the fact that it is, in fact, a part of the natural part of nature. Yeah. So I included those things in there. So that is actually my response to the people who might have that perspective that you highlighted.
You're doing, you know, double time work in that. One, you're showing love that isn't portrayed, but too, you're showing it with the backdrop of slavery. And it's so interesting because I think that people pick up a Black book and they think this is going to be about trauma because that is the Black experience and that's it. And it's like, no, you have a fight with your boyfriend and sometimes you get annoyed. And even in all of these things, these things are all still really palpable and true to the human experience. Tell me about creating Isaiah and Samuel and who presented themselves to you first? How did they find you?
That's a really interesting story. So in my first semester of graduate school, I was in a fiction tutorial course with Stacey Durasmo as instructor. And she told us to go out into the world and find objects that characters in novels that we're thinking about might possess. New York City being what it is, I found a pair of shackles by the garbage on the true story. Ask Stacey.
No.
I found a pair of shackles and I picked them up, and God knows what the story of those shackles is. But I picked them up and I felt the weight of them and I said, yes, this character is enslaved. And I know that I want to write about a Black queer character. Have mercy, I'm going to have to write about a Black queer character during antebellum slavery, and people are going to be pissed. But I'm going to do it. And I came home and I started to sketch out this character, write about what this character liked to eat, what they look like, what they smell like, who they love, all of those things. And that's when Samuel was born.
And I mean, I feel like he found you.
Yes, he absolutely found me. His name was Simon originally until he told me, though, no, that's not my name.
They do that. They take months and they're like, you've been writing the wrong name, so you better do a find edit real quick. Yeah.
Real quick. And then after that, realizing, well, who does he love? Who's in community with him? Who hates him? That is how the other characters started to form. So Isaiah came next, and then Maggie, and then so on and so forth. And finally, I had a community of characters.
Maggie, one of my favorites. I think she's a crowd favorite. Maggie was really wonderful. I'd love to talk more about your process and what your writing looks like on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, 14 years, I'm sure your work schedule is changing, but to create this novel, where is your happy place of working every day? It
was so hard because I feel like writing is my purpose, but I also had to earn a living. Mm-hmm. So when I was in undergrad, I was working 3 part-time jobs. When I was in grad school, I was working 2 part-time jobs. Then when I finally graduated, I was working a full-time job that required so much of my creative energy that when I got home to write, I was so depleted. So I had to figure out what's the sacrifice that I have to make to ensure that no matter how long it takes, I'm going to write this novel. And the sacrifice was the witching hour. So I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I would write and I would write and I would write. And I'd look at the clock and say, okay, if I write to about 4 o'clock, 4:30, I can still go back to sleep to get up at 7 to go to work.
No.
That's how I did it. And that's primarily the reason why it took 14 years is because 3 hours is not enough time. An hour and a half is not enough time. I needed more time than that. So then I said, okay, on the weekends, you're going to be writing all day. Didn't turn out that way because I still had to do laundry. Mm-hmm. I still had to clean the house. I still had to cook. I had to do all of the domestic things that, I couldn't do during the week because I was working. Right. So it was just a matter of, okay, you know what? I'm going to write a paragraph today on my commute to work on this bus or train. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sit out on the stoop of my house on Saturday morning before everyone gets up and it gets busy. It's time for me to do the laundry, and I'm going to write a page and a half. And I did all of those sorts of things for 14 years until I got what I got.
I mean, everything is time, and time is everything. And time is the greatest gift to a writer. So I so appreciate your honesty around that. Also, I'm having too much fun in asking all of my questions. Y'all, if you have questions, please put them below and I will ask them of Robert in a little bit. But yes, let's get back to time. I love hearing that because it's the reality of being a writer, in that you have to pay your bills and do all of those other things. And when I was writing my novel, I had 3 jobs at one point. I was a barista making $8.50 an hour. Yes, yes, I was a copywriter to a designer, and then I was working for this probably illegal website doing blog posts for them. I hope they never see the light of day, but I was like, this is my rent. I'm going to make it work. I would love to know about some of your jobs while you were writing this.
When I was an undergrad, I worked in the English majors counseling office as a junior counselor.
That's pretty good.
I worked at the Scholastic store as a salesperson, and I worked as an English tutor. Okay. So that was undergrad. Then in grad school, I was still at the Scholastic store and I was still tutoring. And then when I finally graduated, the first job I held as full-time was, I became manager of the Scholastic store, and that was an absolute disaster. And then I said, you know what, I want a job writing. So I'm going to do everything in my power to write. And so I went actually back to the Career Center of Brooklyn College, where I graduated from, and I spoke with a counselor named Natalia Guarin-Klein, who's an amazing woman. And I said, look, I have 2 degrees in writing, and I don't know how to get a job writing. She connected me with former alumni who were working in publishing, who are writers and all this other stuff, and they gave me all this great advice. She helped me get interviews in the industry, and I wound up getting a job at Brooklyn College in their communications and marketing department as a senior writer. And so I did that all the way until the Prophets for 10 years.
And I'm sure she's in your acknowledgments. Like, that person who hooks up in that way is just, they are the original producer, and that's amazing. I want a couple more questions before I let everybody else in. You and I both really enjoy writing about how memory functions, especially through trauma and over time, sometimes as a weapon, sometimes as a healing mechanism. What went into your approach to memory in this novel about queer love in slavery?
That's a great question. And people, please, if you haven't read Such a Fun Age, you need to read that book. Oh, Kiley.
Both love our memory. It's a good, I can write about it all day.
For me, memory functions in the way that it's connected to how stories are passed down in my family. The Western point of view is, if it's not written down, if it's not peer reviewed, if it's not in a book, then it doesn't count. But an Africanist point of view is, the story is important, and you have to pass that story on through. And even if I can't tell you, you'll feel it, because we have something called blood memory. So for me, memory functioned as a way to connect over bodies of water, over spans of time. It was a way to sort of put back into narratives things that have been erased. Memory was really, really important in that, for example, I had no clue that my name, Robert, has such a history in our family. The very first person who was named Robert in my family was an enslaved young man who didn't make it across from England to the United States when the whites who owned him brought the entire family over. They were named the Habershams, who petitioned the King of England for land in Savannah so that they could avoid abolition, which was happening in England, and come to the United States and continue to own slaves and make money. Robert, the oldest son of the 2 enslaved people that they owned, did not survive the passage. So his younger brother, in tribute to him, named his oldest son Robert. And every oldest boy, down to my father, down to me, is named Robert because of that first Robert who did not make the journey. So memory for me is the same thing as writing it down. It is just as important, the oral, the mental, just as important as the written narrative. And it functions in a way that helps us to connect to things that have been severed and broken and erased. We don't have the birth certificates and the ledgers. So we
Right.
have to remember. We have to go deep inside into our mitochondria and remember.
I'm overwhelmed. That's so beautiful, and there is something to the names that we carry. Follow me with this. I used to play guitar, and I remember I got my guitar fixed, and the guy who fixed my guitar said, "Well, how often are you going to play it? Are you really going to do this?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Wood has memory. You're teaching it. The wood's going to bend to what you put into it." And there's something about that like the name Robert has been passed on and on and on because of someone who didn't make it when he shouldn't have been on that boat in the first place. And I just think it's really beautiful that you are the living legacy of your ancestors. And in a more simplistic way, I just learned that Robert is also Uncle Bobbie in a certain world. Yes. Which is pretty great. Can you tell us why you're Uncle Bobbie?
To avoid confusion with my dad, who passed away, but he was Robert, so they gave me the nickname Bobbie. But now, in one of my favorite jobs ever, I'm an uncle. My brother Tron has 5 children, and I'm Uncle Bobbie to them. And so that name, the fact that we're having this conversation at Uncle Bobbie's, and that I am Uncle Bobbie, which is like probably the most important job to me in the world, is a nice bit of simpatico serendipity, and I love it.
I love that. I love that so much. Uncle Bobbie's means a lot to me, and I'm so glad to know you were an Uncle Bobbie as well. I'm going to do 2 more questions before I let everyone else in. You have curated a social justice, social media community. People look to you and your posts to see what's going on. How does writing a novel compare to writing about social justice for a community?
Woo! That's a good question. Writing the novel is in many ways very solitary work, where I have to be quiet and still and go inside and think very deeply and listen and meditate and hope that the voices and these characters and the ancestors who are animating them will speak to me and trust me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all by myself when I'm doing that. When I'm moderating Son of Baldwin or writing for Son of Baldwin or curating for Son of Baldwin, it is a community endeavor. Everybody's involved with various opinions and points of view, and me trying to navigate that, as well as navigate people who are there simply to disrupt, to cause trouble, to cause chaos, and that takes a different kind of toll on your psyche. The writing of the novel is definitely an exhausting but rewarding sort of event, and in its own way, moderating Son of Baldwin in the space of social media, which can always be so toxic, or often be so toxic, is another way that you're weighed on, your psyche's weighed on, but is also very rewarding, because from those conversations I learned so much. Like, when am I going to ever be able to speak to a Black lesbian from Zimbabwe who's in a relationship with a transgender woman from Uganda, like
on site, just
on site, and get their points of view about race, gender, sexuality, which is wholly different from everything that I've been trained here in the West.
Mm-hmm.
So Son of Baldwin has been a blessing, because it helped me to think about how to shape these characters, how to not offend when shaping these characters, and how to give them more dimension, to give them a point of view that's grander than just the Western one. So
yep.
It's been great.
I'm sure that it's interesting to think of all the people who probably affected the creation of this just from communicating about social justice, which is really, really beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna do last one. What is your cat's name? Why is he so cute?
My cat's name is Baldwin, and he is lamping over here, not even in his bed, but on the thing that his bed is laying on. We got him as a 6-week-old kitten back in like 2009. A friend of mine who I worked with, his cat had kittens and she was giving them away, and I said yes. And he is low-key the boss of the house. He is something else, spoiled, rotten, and fiercely defensive of myself and my husband.
I love that. You don't need a dog, you got a cat. That's all you need. I love it. Okay, I'm going to get into some of these questions that everyone has written. Michael F. says, which contemporary fiction authors, besides me, that's so nice, do you enjoy reading and draw influence from? I was going to ask that one too. Who are you into?
Well, Kiley Reid is one of the authors that I'm into. Because Black women authors, I think Black women are the best writers on the planet. So I often go to Black women's works because Black women write with an honesty that many other people don't, because they're afraid of being that vulnerable. But Black women are not afraid, because I think Black women find some sort of strength in vulnerability. And that's the key to being a writer like Toni Morrison. But other writers contemporarily that I like, other than Kiley, Britt Bennett, Raven Lilani. There's this new author whose book came out the same day as mine, Mateo Ascaripour, Black Buck.
Okay.
He is killing the game. I love Kiese Layman, who is just out of this world brilliant. Reading Memorial by him, just fascinating. Ocean Vuong, have mercy. One of the best writers I have ever encountered in my life. He writes with such sensitivity. Oh, it's absolutely.
I would want to teach a sentence class. He's the one who you want to take his sentence class.
Listen, he is absolutely amazing. And then for me, the King of Kings is Marlon James, who writes with such complexity and beauty and rawness. Yes. There's so many. I can go on and on.
That was a great list. That was really, really great. Let's see.
Oh, Disha Ilya, Secret Lives of Church Ladies.
Oh, yes. I have seen that cover. Yes, I have some work to do. Yes. This question's from Nuclea. Every page cries power. Yes. How many rewrites did you have to do, and how, if any, has it changed the way you critique novels? That's a great question.
I have rewritten this book countless times. Like, I can't even count. I have over here a pile of all the revisions that I ever printed out of the Prophets, and it's almost up to my hip. 14 years of rewriting. That is essentially what writing is. Writing is just rewriting over and over again. One of the best things I learned in the MFA program was never fall in love with your first draft, because you'll never see it again. I found my first draft, actually, and I looked at it and I cringed a little bit. like, ooh, that was not good. But
you have to get that out, or nothing else happens. Yeah.
Right. You have to get it out, and you have to look at it and say, okay, I got to do better. And you have to do better over and over again, because you're always a better writer tomorrow than you are today. So I've rewritten countless times. And what it's made me realize about novels is, because when you read a novel, you think, oh my God, I'll never be able to write like this. This person wrote so brilliantly, not knowing that that person rewrote that book 69 times to get it to the point where you fell in love with it. And so that's what I've learned about critiquing novels is, first of all, seeing the work that went into it, taking that into consideration when I critique it, because I know it is so difficult and so hard to write a novel of particular kind of beauty and work. I know that author, other than, maybe James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, didn't have to do it as many times as we do. Maybe them. Maybe even Gloria Naylor and Alice Walker too, and Octavia Butler. But for the rest of us mere mortals, it takes a lot of time. So I think I critique novels, and now all sorts of art, with a little bit more sensitivity. Like, I don't want to go in on somebody unless they're writing to purposely offend on the basis of race, sexuality, gender, things of that nature. People who are trying to demean others, I'll go in on. But other artists who are trying something, who have great intentions, I want to be more sensitive and more thoughtful about the critique.
I completely agree. I save the going in for when someone's doing something harmful. But other than that, it's just like, you know, this is what they did this time. Let me see what they do next time, you know, because you change as a person and as a writer so often. I second that completely. Michaela asks, Robert, what is your favorite chapter in the Prophets and why?
Ooh, that is a great question. My favorite chapter is maybe Song of Songs, the chapter in which Kosai is now on the slave ship, and this is in one of the African chapters, and he's remembering his upbringing, his village, his people, and there's a moment, a conversation he remembers with his father that reveals something to him about the moment that he's in and leads him to actions that he takes later on. I think that is my favorite part because it says something about innocence and about how innocence, as Baldwin would put it, is a crime because it makes the person who deems themselves innocent irresponsible. And I think that is one of my, at least right now, that is my favorite moment in the Prophets because it changes every day. Sometimes it's something Maggie said. Sometimes it's something Sarah said. Sometimes it's Pua altogether. I think Pua might be my favorite character in the whole novel, but it changes. But right now it's that chapter.
That's totally fair. Yes, changes by the day. Okay, let's see. Are you a comic book person?
Big time.
I did not know this. I thought this was coming out of nowhere, but now I'm ready. Okay, so Nicolea asks, who is your favorite comic book character and what is the quality / superpower you admire and why? Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman is my all-time favorite superhero. She's the first superhero that I ever encountered other than, and she's not really a superhero, but I consider her a superhero, Valerie from Josie and the Pussycats, because she was super smart and she used to solve all the problems and stuff like that. So she was the very first character that I encountered that I considered a superhero. But my favorite traditional superhero is Wonder Woman because her goal is to end patriarchy, white supremacy, all of the isms is her goal as a superhero. She's not afraid to interfere in misogyny and all of these things. My favorite power of hers is actually in one of her weapons. I love that she has the lasso of truth because what it does is it forces people not just to tell the truth, but to face it, which is what we need in America right now. And maybe the rest of the world as well.
Very, very symbolic. Yes, I completely agree. ALG asked this question. This is so nice. Such a big fan of you both. So excited to read The Prophets. Can you talk more about what Kiley mentioned at the beginning, how this moment reflects social ills that have persisted for hundreds of years? Where do you see opportunities for disruption now that they don't keep disruption now so that they don't keep persisting? And how do you personally balance being an artist and an activist? I love that question.
Ooh, that is a question. That's a good here's what I see when I think about what we're going through right now. So we're not on the cotton plantation anymore, picking cotton, but we have the prison industrial complex, which serves the same purpose, the exact same purpose. We no longer have overseers whipping us, making us do work, but now we have officers kneeling on our necks, killing us live on television. We have not grown as a nation at all. We just changed a little bit with the same goal, which is to kill Black people or to do something awful to Black people. Where do I see places for interruption agitation in this moment. You know what? I don't know, because 74 million people in this country believe that killing a Black man on camera is normal, fine, and perfect. And that's the way it should have been and should be. So I no longer find this place savable. At least it's not in my ability to think how we save this nation, and maybe it shouldn't be saved. Just before we got on this call, I was listening to CNN, and the FBI just issued a warning that Trump supporters are planning to storm every state capitol in all 50 states armed, because they lost an election and they cannot face that they lost the election, because white supremacy has so trained them to deny reality, reshape it to say whatever they want it to say, so that when the truth is staring them in the face, they call it a lie. And when the lie is the thing that is at the center of the thing, they call it the truth. How do you save or tell 74 million people that they got it wrong? And they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that at all. So I'm not sure what, I know this for certain. These states ain't united and have never been.
There's so much truth that you're saying. And more than anything, I want to say, I appreciate you saying, I do not know. Because right now, I understand when people seek Black art, they say, help me be better. What do I don't know. Because one, I'm one person. And two, if I don't see, if what we see is white supremacy evolving and not getting better just because it looks a little bit different, then it's not our position to give people hope when that's not what we see. So I really appreciate your honesty. And I am really interested in how activism and art happen side by side, because that happens, and I think it should happen that way. But I also really respect your answer of I'm not sure. This isn't a united place.
And the other piece of that question that I didn't answer about art and activism is that they're not separate from me. Toni Morrison said, in moments just like this is when the artist is to go to work. This is the time that we're needed, because artists provide an alternate way of thinking, an alternate way of seeing, an alternate way of interpreting. And so right now is the time that the artist goes to work. And for artists who are like you, Kiley, woman in Black, and me, Black and queer, and at all of the intersections, everything we write in a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy is by definition political. Because our ancestors were told not to read nor write at the threat of death. So the minute I pick up a pen, it's automatically political, whether I want it to be or not.
And it should be. It should be, if it's from your heart. I love that a lot. Let's see, who do we have here? So excited to read this, says Allie. Out of curiosity, what compelled you to write a novel as opposed to a work of nonfiction?
I keep quoting Toni Morrison here. Forgive me, she is my all-time favorite writer. I love her. Toni Morrison said, "Fiction is not fact, but it is truth." And unlike nonfiction, where I have to make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed in a particular way, otherwise people say, okay, you made this one mistake, throw the whole thing out. I have more room in fiction to get at some universal truths that I don't have to provide every single fact to back up this point of view, but I can suggest something that leads us toward truth. And then also, there's something about the human being that loves the story. And things are better communicated, I think, when they are given color. And fiction is one of the best places in terms of narrative writing, where you can give color, where you can see inside the character's mind and heart. You can't really do that with nonfiction. You can guess, you can quote, but you can't mind read. in nonfiction, but you can in fiction.
You can.
And that is something that I just absolutely adore about that genre and writing in it.
I completely agree. I think fiction has this place where it hits you, and a place where the essay and the think piece can't do it. Fiction is it for me as well. Isabel Ballester said, "Your ability to capture Black queer love with such joy will forever be a gift. Representation outside of trauma, like Kiley said, is imperative to our collective healing. Did you find any healing in the writing process of this novel?"
Oh, that is a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. Yes. The healing that I found was one, in accepting myself as Black and queer and realizing that those things are compatible despite anti-queer people who may say they are not.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I found healing was giving Samuel and Isaiah this story, which I feel is testimony, because no, Samuel and Isaiah may have not existed themselves, but certainly people like Samuel and Isaiah have existed. In fact, my maternal grandfather's eldest brother, Milton, I found out in the last 3 years was a closeted gay man who had to get married and do all of these things because that was the time he lived in. He was born in 1897. Emigrated from St. Kitts to the United States in 1906 through Ellis Island. I don't know if some people know that some Black people came through Ellis Island from the Caribbean and other places. And he got married and kept his life in the closet. But he was born in 1897 and was queer. And his story was never told. And everybody in my family knew and never said anything until one day when they realized I was writing this book. They said, "Oh, Uncle Milton was gay." What? Why didn't I know this? All I knew about him was he was this really dignified, tall, handsome gentleman who lived in Washington Heights in Manhattan and had an impeccably decorated home. That's all I remembered to him. He left to my mother 2 lamps that were painted with 14 karat gold, China lamps. And if that didn't tell me, but
The proof is in the pudding. Yes. Yes. I hope
yes,
you have these. They sound really beautiful.
I think my mother got rid of them.
Oh.
I think she did.
Okay. Well, now his name, I remember the name Milton in the beginning of your book. He's immortalized in another place.
Yes.
It's really wonderful. I actually really love this question from R.E. Liebman. Why are there so many writers in Brooklyn? Are you part of a community of writers there? There are a lot of writers in Brooklyn.
I don't know what it is about Brooklyn. It might be the energy. There is something really Black about sections of Brooklyn, something really immigrant about sections of Brooklyn, something really funky about section of Brooklyn. And Philadelphia people should be able to relate to this because Philadelphia and Brooklyn are very similar places in terms of the energy and the culture and the courage. Because all the Philadelphians I know don't play. They don't play games. And that's just like all the Brooklyn people that I know. They don't play games. So in places like that where truth speaking is not frowned upon, art can flourish. And I think that's why places like Brooklyn and Philadelphia and certain areas in the South, you find, like Mississippi, you find all of these artists just coming out. But also there's I think the need to articulate a suffering and a pain in a way that is beautiful, that certain people in certain communities experience, that kind of help shape the way Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and other places operate. So I think that all of those things go into why Brooklyn is so artsy. And I love Brooklyn.
Me too. Every time I'm back, I'm like, oh, I do love Brooklyn. Yes. Okay, let's see. Miss Sally Kim has asked, during these 14 years, did you see yourself here with the published book on book tour, and how does it feel?
I would not allow myself to see myself in those things. Like there would be fleeting moments of me thinking about it and then immediately not letting myself think about it because I think I'm jinxing myself.
Yes. 100%. Wait, I have to. Did you do
Say,
this with your husband where like if he says, "Oh, well, when you do this," and you're like, "Don't say that. Don't do that. Don't jinx."
in fact, he would start to say it and then say, "Let me not jinx it." So yes, because maybe this is a part of trauma of being Black in this country, is that you're skeptical and suspicious of joy. You think if I hold on to this thing, someone's going to snatch it away from me. Or you think I'm not worthy of this. And so how dare I even think that I should be able to enjoy it?
Mm-hmm.
And that was what I was dealing with this entire 14 years. Although I do have a vision board where I put these things up there and then didn't look at it because I didn't want to jinx myself. But these are the things that I wanted to manifest. What is happening to me now is a lifelong dream. And it's surreal. It feels absolutely surreal sitting here talking to you, Kiley, your book in the background, my book in the background. This is just absolutely surreal. It was surreal sitting at the table with Sally Kim when we were meeting with publishers to see who wanted to publish this book. The whole journey has just felt like there's this Robert sitting here talking to you, and then there's the other Robert watching going, oh my God, this is really happening. And that's what it feels like.
It's surreal is the perfect word. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so happy that we are joined through this person that we really trust with our babies, which is really difficult too. And that just makes me like, there's a family you grow up with, and then all of a sudden I never thought that I would call you and Chloe my siblings. And it's just really, really touching to me. And I'm so thrilled for you. My last question, I always like to end with what you are reading now. The reading never stops. What are you reading?
I am currently reading The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philyaw. Which is a collection of short stories about Black women and their relationship to church and each other and family and love. And it is, particularly at this time, almost like a grandmother's hug to let you know that it's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be okay. I'm imitating my great grandmother Mary when I do that. It is a beautifully written work, and I love Disha. We now consider each other cousins.
I love that.
We've never met in person, but we talk often on Instagram and Facebook and such, and we consider each other cousins, and I love that book. Next up for me is Black Buck, my Mateo Ascarapur, and Britt Bennett's The Vanishing Half.
It's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. You're in for a really wonderful time. I don't want to end. This has been really, really nice. I wish we could do this in person. Next time in person at Uncle Bobbie's, and then we can have a coffee from that point. Thank you so much for chatting with me. This was really, really lovely.
Thank you, Kiley, so much for having me. Thank you to Uncle Bobbie's. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. That was such a touching and just such an insightful conversation. I'm so excited that we got to be a part of this book's journey out into the world. Thank you for the audience for such amazing questions, such amazing participation. And I know I can count on the Uncle Bobbie's fam to bring it. Thanks everyone for showing up, and thanks Kiley and Robert for being here.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.